it's me, Laura Jean. I'm back with another episode of Cooking Up the Code. Today I wanted to go over RxJs Subjects. Subjects is a big topic of conversation when I do interviews for Angular jobs. And they're a very important aspect of the RxJS library. And so Subject is a very special type of observable. It basically acts like an event emitter. So it's a good way to store state, to be able to share state between different components. So in Angular, if you've got two different components that need the same piece of state, you can build a subject or a service that has a subject inside of it. And then both components would then have access to the value inside that subject to use. And so there's actually three different types of subjects. There's the plain old subject, there's a behavior subject, and there is a replay subject. So you can see here, all of these are typed, type, down here, type, right? But they each have different properties or parameters that can be passed in. So a subject does not need any parameters. A behavior subject requires a value, so an initial value in the constructor. And then the replay subject has two optional parameters. We've got the buffer size, and then actually it has three different optional parameters: buffer size and window time and timestamp provider. Now, typically you're only going to be using the buffer size, but one point of note here is that if you do not set a buffer size on your replay subject, the default value is infinity, which means that your replay subject will literally store any value, like all the values that you pass to it. So one of the questions I get asked a lot is, Laura Jean, which subject should I use? And so I've created a little StackBlix application to kind of go over this for you. So as we can see here, I'm actually going to comment this out again. Oops, there we go. So as you can see here, we've got just a little application that I've made. It's an Angular application. I've got plain old subject, replay subject, and behavior subject. So you can see that my component has one dependency, which is this subject service here. And so in this subject, in this service, I've got three subjects. I've got a subject, a replay subject, and a behavior subject. And I've given us the ability to call next on those subjects. And I've also exposed those subjects as an observable on these public properties here. One thing to keep in mind is you should never allow access directly to the subject in your service. Only the service itself should know how to call next or actually expose the observable. So we're kind of following some best practices there. Now you can see here in behavior subject, we had that one required parameter here. So value, we have to pass it an initial value. And you can see if I take this out here, we start to get a TypeScript error. So I'll put that back in. And you can see that when our component initializes, the only one of these subjects that has a value currently is the behavior subject. Now the replay subject, I told it to give us back one value, right? So remember, if we don't pass anything in here, it'll literally store every value that comes into this stream. But if we pass it a 1, it just remembers the previous value. Now I'll show you here what happens. So if we wanted to have our replay subject have an initial value, we would have to actually initialize it in the constructor of the service. So we're going to go ahead and do that here. So you can see in our constructor, I go ahead and call next on the replay subject. And so basically what this is doing, behavior subject is the only one that is an active stream when it's instantiated, right? So behavior subject is born having a value in it. Subject is just like an open stream. It's essentially like a RxJS never, where there's just no values in it until you call next. And replay subject is the same thing. It's just an empty stream until you push a value to it, right? So in this case, we've pushed a value to the replay subject. So now that is available in our component. So we can go back to our component here and see how I've got that wired up. So you can see I've grabbed a reference to the subjects in the subject service. And then I'm taking advantage of the async pipe here. in my template to subscribe. So the way that the async pipe works is that when the component is initialized, it will go ahead and subscribe to the observable for you. And when the component destroys, it'll actually unsubscribe for you. So it helps prevent those memory leaks that we can get if we forget to unsubscribe from our observables. So what this code is saying here is that if there is a value in this subject, go ahead and render it out in this span. If there's not a value, so this plain old subject currently does not have a value, it won't even render this span to the DOM. So if I were to inspect this, there would be no span there because this does not get rendered to the DOM. So you can see here that, so we've got our behavior subject and our replay subject. So once again, if I do not initialize the replay subject, the only one of these subjects that's going to have a value on the initial page load is going to be the behavior subject because it's the only one that has to have a value when it's instantiated. So if I go ahead and uncomment this, now we can see that our behavior subject has a value and our replay subject has a value, but our plain old subject does not have a value yet. And that's because the plain old subject is not caching any values. It simply sends them out, and if you happen to get it, good for you. If you were too late, you missed it, right? So if we go ahead and set a value here, let's just say Laura Jean is great. I'm going to call next on that. Now you can see that our component has values from each of the subjects. So this is a pretty easy gotcha when you're just getting started with service with a subject, because if you use just a plain old subject and you're expecting the value to be there when your component initializes, it might not be there, right? You might have missed that value coming in. So usually if I'm creating a service with a subject, I'm going to reach for behavior subject because I want to make sure it has a value, unless I don't want there to be a value until there is an actual value. And so then I might reach for replay subject. So I hope this has helped you out somewhat. And I will put the link to this example up in the notes on the video. But I hope you had a good time with me today, and I hope you'd enjoyed cooking up the code.